So you join us down SWS's Larkville complex. There's 4 lakes on the complex: the Ocean, Larky 2, Railway and Rhode Island. The main one I've been focusing on this year is the Ocean, but for the cameras this session I decided to have a little go on the Railway, which is absolutely steeped in history. I'm sure many of you have heard of the lake and its former and still current residents, and yeah, it's looking good. The weather's lovely now. We was planning to film on the record-breaking hottest day of the year, but we had to cancel it, not only for our safety but the fish's safety as well. It'd be quite silly of us to try and get fish out and film them in that weather. But now it's looking nice and overcast. The temperatures have cooled off by about 15 degrees and it looks prime. So fingers crossed. We've got some bait on the spots. They're ready to go. We're going to keep an eye on the area, make sure that we don't see carp in any other areas, because if we do we might have to move. I did have a little comment last night, one of the new stockies, one of the new additions, but we've got just over 24 hours, so hopefully we can show you one of these Railway carp. So just to give you a bit more reasoning of why I've picked this swim, although I hadn't fished it until last week, I'd walked the lake quite often when I walked Larky 2, this lake. I like walking the whole complex, even if I'm not fishing the lakes. It's a lovely place to stretch the old legs. But when I was walking around this lake in particular, I noticed quite a few fish using the margin that I've got 2 rods on quite regularly, going up and down the margin, clearing spots right tight to the margin. Although some of them spots right close to the margin I couldn't fish because there's banks of weed in front of them, my approach has been fishing as close to them holes that they've created naturally behind them banks of weed as possible. I've been looking at the carp when they've been coming in and out of them areas, trying to figure out where they come out of, which part of the weed beds they go in and they go out, and just trying to really assess their movements. Last week was really hot, as previously mentioned, and there was a lot of fish down in this corner, a lot of fish on the surface. And the only thing about this lake, it's a good thing because the lake is very rich with naturals and the fish look incredible, but the lake does have quite a weedy makeup. So out in open water, you do have to be quite accurate and persistent in finding spots. So I didn't want to disturb the swim too much when I come in here last week. So I found one spot in open water, which isn't dead clean, but it's a lot cleaner than everything around it. So I've presented one pop-up rig on there, which I think you wouldn't get away with a wafter. You have to fish a pop-up because it is still quite choddy and there is bits of broken weed on the bottom. The 2 margin spots, like I said, they're just behind the initial bank of weeds under the trees. So I've baited areas under the trees and just off of the trees, and you can look at the spots. You can assess whether the spots are being cleaned. You can assess whether the bait's being eaten. Obviously there's birds that do feed on them spots as well, but you have got good depths in all the margins here. As soon as it starts shelving off, you've got really deep water in, I'd say 80% of the marginal spots. So it's a really good area to target, full of weed, full of naturals, and the fish do spend a lot of their time in the margins here. So that was the reasoning behind picking this swim, just through seeing the fish. Last week as well, I did have 7 bites out of this swim, so it was definitely a good choice. It's a lot slower this week, there's not as many fish in here. I think the cooler weather has spread the fish out a little bit more, but there's still fish here. Like I say, I had one last night, so there is still definitely fish feeding in this area. But last night I haven't also seen many fish anywhere else, so I haven't got much more information to go on to make a move yet. But I'm going to keep assessing the situation, and if anything changes, then we may move. But currently we're going to, I'm going to reel in a little while, go for a little walk, see if we can see anything anywhere else. But yeah, currently we're going to be sticking in this swim, sticking to our guns. So one thing I like to do before going for a walk around the lake is knock up a little bucket of bait. The reason being is so if I see any fish or see any opportunities, I can bait them areas, come back to them, and I can also walk past the areas I'm already fishing and bait those also if the bait's gone. So the mix consists of the new SSK fish meal, which I've got bags of confidence in. I'm using that in 2 sizes, 12 and 15 mil, and I've also added some crushed 15 mil in there as well. It's a really soft bait, especially for a shelf life, so you can crush it really easily with your hands. The crush bait itself as well, it absorbs the SSK glug perfectly, and it's a perfect combination. I've also added a little bit of hemp in there as well. That's to replicate some of the snails that inhabit the lake. and to give it a bit more of a crunch. The bait as well also contains loads of oyster shell. That combined with the hemp aids digestion massively. So that's what I'm using on this session, and hopefully it will do the job. So I've stayed in the swim a little bit longer than planned. A few fish have drifted into the bay. We've had quite a big change in weather. It's quite overcast and quite, not cold, but a lot colder than it has been for the last few days. But now the clouds are starting to clear and it's definitely warmed up quite a bit. So I think that's pushed a few fish down into this corner. Had a little cast around because my left-hand rod last night when I saw a few fish show, they showed further than the spot I was fishing. So I've had a little lead around out there. I found a lovely clean spot amongst a load of weed. It's probably only 1 metre by 1 metre in size, so the perfect spot to present a bait. I'm going to put 5 or 6 bombs over that now, and then have a reel in, go for a walk and assess the situation, see if we can find carp anywhere else. So we just crouched down under this willow, having a little look at the first spot I'm fishing along this margin. I've baited it a couple of times over the last week and they've made a nice clearing just past the end of that willow there. There's a big bank of weed just this side of it, but they've made a lovely little clearing where they've been feeding on the bait I've been putting in. The session I did last week, I didn't actually fish this spot because I wanted to just clear it up nicely before fishing it and making sure it was nice and presentable. I've actually got to spoon this one out as well because there's an overhanging tree to the right of the swim that stops you casting into this area. So any area that's sort of more difficult to get to is always worth looking at because quite often they go ignored. So I'm going to get a little bit more bait out on this spot before we go for a lap, and then I'm going to go take a look at the second spot. So we're just at the second spot having a little look. I haven't seen any fish yet, but I've popped the marker up just so we can bait accurately, so I can actually bait exactly to where I'm fishing, because you get a complete different perspective from over the other side. So I want to make sure that the bait goes exactly where I'm fishing. I haven't seen no fish along this bank at the moment, but I did see a couple creep into the bay when the sun came out earlier. It's overcast again now, so the conditions have changed yet again. So we're going to continue with our walk and see if we can see any carp anywhere else. So having a little reel in earlier and having a walk round definitely pays dividends. And if I just sat here with the rods out all day, I wouldn't have seen what I've seen. Further down to my left, on the first swim you come to, there was a good stock of fish in that snag there, and there was a couple of fish that I think I recognise as some of the A-team. Although I do think I've got a good chance in this swim, and I have got a good chance of catching considering I've been baiting and priming the spots, I just can't ignore what I've seen. I need to get down there, pack up and get the rods out down there. So what a result. We haven't had a chance to do an update because of the weather. The weather's changed. It's been raining for the last 2-3 hours. Managed to get the 3 rods out though in the rain with a bushwhacker. And yeah, just getting the 3rd rod out, just dropped it, and this one rattled off on the middle rod. Bit of a chaotic situation where Scott had to help me with the baiting spoon, get that spoon in while I was playing the fish. And yeah, what a result. I'm gonna get this one back, and hopefully we'll have a chance of a few more. So I haven't had much time to update you guys this afternoon. It's been pretty hectic, to be honest. As soon as we started moving and packing up the gear from the other swim, we had quite heavy rain. That's continued throughout the afternoon, and it's quite a contrast to the bright blue skies we had earlier today. So that fish earlier came to the middle rod, a rod that I shipped out with a baiting spoon quite close to the snag where we saw the fish earlier. It just goes to show that observation is key. We could have sat on our hands and stayed in the swim we was in. We did see fish there, but they were only there when the sun was higher earlier on and there was blue skies, sunning themselves more than actually feeding. So the decision was made, we upped sticks and moved swims, and it paid off. So having that fish quite early on has filled me with confidence that we've made the right decision on moving. I've got all 3 rods over by the snags now, which I shipped all of them out by the baiting spoon with just a handful of bait of SSK and hemp and the SSK glug. Fingers crossed that carp won't be the last of this session. So just coming up to 11 o'clock, and just after dark we've had a little flurry of bites. Had 2 bites in quick succession. Had another one about the same size, maybe a slightly smaller. But yeah, it's going really well. Full of confidence for the night ahead. But yeah, gonna get this one back and I'll show you the other one, and I need to get the rods back out. So another little one, just before dark I decided to put a rod out in open water to cover all bases. And yeah, an hour later we had this little one. So we get both rods back out now, a load more bait, and hopefully we'll have a few bigger ones this evening. So good morning people, bit of a hectic night last night. We had another fish after them couple you saw at 11 o'clock last night around 12:30. Didn't get to sleep till 1, 1:30 because we sat up having a cup of tea after getting the rod back out. And yeah, it's going really well. I'm pretty knackered. I've just reeled in one of the rods because I felt like we should have had another bite on that rod and it wasn't a bit of chod, so glad we reeled that in. I've put that back on the spot and I'm really confident for a couple more fish. We haven't got all day today, but we've got till this afternoon, so fingers crossed we catch another couple of fish. I'm going to get the kettle on now, have a coffee, watch the morning dwindle away, and hopefully it won't be long before we get another bite on that middle rod. So all the fish in this session have come to the same tactic, same rig and same hook bait. So I'm going to take a little minute now to show you what I've been using and why I've been using it. Starting with the rig material, I like to use a nice stiff coated braid with this rig. That's so when it gets picked up and rejected, it does reset at all times. What I do is I strip 6 inches off the end, I tie a loop multi-rig style, and then I get a bit of shrink tube and pierce a hole just before the normal exit. So that allows me to fish liner style, which I believe kicks the hook over far better and more efficiently when the hook bait is picked up off the bottom. You can also change the hook really easily. All you've got to do is slide a bit of shrink tube off the shank of the hook, unloop the uncoated part of the rig, slide the hook off and slide a new one on. I use this rig for snowmen, bottom baits, wafters, and in this case I've got an SSK pop-up in there sat just off the debris on the bottom. So that's the rig that's been doing it for me at the moment. It's mega effective, easy to tie, and works in a multitude of situations. So the morning went by pretty uneventfully. After the bite last night and redoing the rods this morning, nothing's happened. We've sat by the rods this morning, and after a little walk around into the snags over there, it was clearly evident the majority of the fish had gone. So unfortunately, our time on this session has come to an end, and the session itself has highlighted to me how important it is to get on your toes, walk the lake and find the fish. We could have sat dormant in the other swim that I baited previously to this week, and we could have sat there, maybe caught 1 or 2, but we wouldn't have had the fish that we had. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to get through to any of the originals, but I'll definitely be back for them in the future. A big thank you to Aidan and Matt and all the guys at SWS Fisheries, as well as the guys at TMA Active. We really appreciate you allowing us to come down here and film, and we also appreciate all the hard work you're putting into regenerating this lake to its former glory. So I'm going to get the rods wound in, go home, see the family, and until next time, I'll see you later.